Hi, this is Justin Leet, and this is my Equity Action Plan. My first goal is to create an inclusive classroom. I would like to use the following steps to achieve this. I think that if I do plan on taking my special education AQ, part 1 and part 2. I think that doing this and accomplishing this is going to give me the tools that I need to be able to recognize various needs in my classroom, but also it will give me the tools to address them, and also it will provide me with solutions to solve the problems as necessary. By using differentiated instruction as well as universal design for learning, I will account for all of the needs that my students have in my classroom before it's important. I've noticed that many students who have high special needs or high learning needs in the classroom often don't get the support that they need because they need to go through the proper channels, and it's not always that's not always given to them. So I feel that by offering these students differentiated instruction and universal design for learning with the philosophy that what is necessary for some is beneficial for all, then even the students that have been recognized as having these needs or as somebody who will benefit from these needs can still benefit regardless. And that information comes from Learning for All and Education for All. And I think that it's important for me to implement, as I mentioned, differentiated instruction and universal design for learning to help create an inclusive classroom. My second goal is to reduce the effects of privilege in my classroom. When I'm talking about privilege, I'm specifically talking about white privilege as well as male privilege, but then there's also a lot of other privileges that could happen depending on the circumstance, of course. I want all of my students to be on an even playing ground. So just reducing the effects of all privilege in my classroom, no matter what that privilege is, I think is my next goal. I think one of the ways that I can do this is to use resources and to find resources that provide a voice for all of my students. So for example, when I'm using textbooks, when I'm using read aloud stories, worksheets, whatever, making sure that names of students or names that are culturally appropriate for whatever students we have in our classroom, making sure that their voice is recognized, making sure that their culture is recognized. Additionally, I want to make sure that I am being culturally sensitive at all times during my teaching. I want to have, posters that promote this, etc., etc. I also want to be making sure that I am aware of Indigenous needs in my classroom. I think that by using traditional Indigenous knowledge in my classroom, I think that whether or not I have Indigenous students in my classroom, I'm going to be meeting those needs and promoting the growth and just creating students who are more sensitive to that kind of thing in general, and I think it's important. Additionally, I want to participate in extra professional development on the topic. I'm certainly glad that I received this training in this equity and diversity class, but I do feel that further webinars or other professional development means is important for me to take so that I can learn other ways that I can reduce privilege. Lastly, another way that I think I can reduce privilege is by reducing the symptoms of low socioeconomic students. So by ensuring that adequate technology is available in our classroom for all students to use means that students at a high SES are not necessarily at an advantage or not being privileged over students in a low SES. and making sure that everybody has equal access to whatever they need to be successful in my classroom. My final goal is to reduce the stigma surrounding mental health issues in my classroom. The Ontario Inclusion Strategy has an extensive list of terminology, and I think that's one way that we can. I think that what's important is that we use the correct terminology as teachers. One thing that's always bothered me is when a teacher's kind of joking around with a student who's kind of maybe being silly and says something like, "Oh, you're crazy." It kind of, what's wrong with being a little crazy kind of thing. Mental health, it's poking fun at the word crazy, and I think that's inappropriate. So just watching the words that we're using. Oh, I'm so anxious about this coming up. That might be a trigger for somebody that has anxiety. So I think that's really important that we're using the correct terminology when we're talking to our students. I think another thing that we need to be doing is, or that I plan to do in my classroom, is to take mental health breaks during extended work periods. Whether that's just stretching, maybe music like dancing, aerobics, breathing breaks, it could be yoga or just guided meditation. I think it's important that by doing this every day or as necessary, and that it being teacher driven, it reduces the stigma behind mental health issues, but also raises awareness that everybody has a mental well-being, and it's important that we're all taking care of it. I also want to bring in guest speakers about mental health. I don't want to just do this on, well, it's Mental Health Day or it's Mental Health Week, and talk about all the negative aspects about mental health. I think it's also important that we bring in guest speakers that can talk about what mental well-being is, and really emphasize the fact that everybody in the classroom has a mental well-being, and that for those of us who do have mental health issues, it doesn't make them strange or anything, because it can happen to anybody. In general, in my day-to-day routine in the classroom, I think it's important that I just want to talk about mental health and mental well-being as if it's just a normal thing, because it is. I think by doing that, casually bringing that up, making sure that everybody is looking after their mental health and their mental well-being, that the stigma surrounding mental health issues goes away. So thank you. This has been my equity action proposal, and thank you for listening. Bye.